All right. Welcome back to the Blueprint Ultra podcast with your hosts, Steve Epifano and Jeff Winchester. Listen, we exist to help you put together your own personal plan for your next Ultra. And we do this by interviewing a variety of guests, from those who are back of the pack like myself, those who are at the middle of the pack like Steve, and those who are at the front of the pack, the elite runners like our guest today. He would say he's not elite, but I consider him elite because I just love him to death. But so seriously, our guest today, though, is somebody many of you have probably heard of by now, but I'm excited to talk to him personally because I met him at a few races over the years. I've actually interviewed him on another podcast for the races that he directs. He is the race director of the Keys 100 and also the race director for the Daytona 100. But I've never had a chance to really get to talk to him as a runner and to hear his story about running and some of the events that he participates in. So I'm looking forward to doing that. Now, I have told our guest multiple times that he is one of the most inspiring runners that I've ever met in my life in the sport. He inspires me to do this. He helps eliminates all of the excuses that I have as a runner as well. And one thing you may not know about him is that he has run over 60 ultra races. He has multiple 100-plus finishes as well. And in 2023, for example, he ran the 6 days in the Dome and the 48-hour event. And he ran 167.5 miles, first place male, at the age of 78. And I think we have to pause and kind of hear that again. Our guest, 167.5 miles in 48 hours, 6 days in the Dome, 2023 at the age of 78. He is an absolute fixture in the Badwater community. He is a volunteer for them. He runs their events. He participates in multiple of the Badwater events that they have, such as the Badwater Cape Fear, Badwater Salton Sea, as well as the Badwater 135. Most recently, he just completed his fourth finish of the Badwater 135, which is incredible just to talk about at the age of 80. And so, again, if you don't know who I'm talking about by now, I apologize. You have your head in the sand. And speaking of sand, we're going to talk about the Badwater sands a lot. But welcome to the show, Mr. Bob Becker. Bob, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jeff. Thank you, Steve. Good to be here.
Yeah, good to have you.
We are absolutely excited to talk to you. Now, I've got some notes here that, we've learned about you really from some background information that you sent us. And we learned that you ran the mile in high school with a personal PR of 4 minutes and 47 seconds. Now, that was back in 1963. So we know that time has changed. Like, we're no longer nearly as fast as we used to be. So we get that, right? You were active in college, and as a younger adult, like most of us, you played sports, and also you worked out in the gym, but you only ran a little to stay in shape, according to what you said. And so you weren't really doing much endurance events. You weren't doing any kind of ultra running at that point. But at the ripe old age of 60, you decided that you would enter into the sport running the Marathon des Sables. And I don't know how to say the word, to be honest with you. It's my best French that I can do. It's the best I can do. And Bob, you can probably correct me on that. But you ran this at the age of 60. It was your first ultra event. So if you could, for those listening, as a runner, how did you start? How did you find yourself running that event and as your first one?
Well, let's start with there was no plan. I guarantee you that. A couple of years before, it would have been I ran Marathon des Sables in 2005. 2001, I moved from Minnesota, from Minneapolis to Fort Lauderdale, where I live now. And the following year, some friends up there said, "Hey, we're going to run Grandma's Marathon. Why don't you come up and join us?" And it sounded like it'd be some fun. So I literally went to the local shoe store and bought a pair of running shoes and asked them what I do now. And they put me in touch with the marathon training group. And I took it seriously and I trained. And I think I started in February. The race was in June. So I went up there to have a few beers with the boys, and it turned out I ran pretty well. And instead of being a one and done, I qualified for Boston. So I said, well, I got to do that. So I kept running and wound up working out with a different group. And one day in 2004, one of them said, "Did you ever hear of the Marathon des Sables?" or Sables, which is an ultramarathon. And I said, "What's an ultramarathon?" So as late as 2004, I didn't even know what an ultra was. So I went home and checked it out and learned that MDS, as it's called, and that's a lot easier to pronounce actually, Jeff, was held in April every year. I think it was the 20th year maybe, or 25th year, organized by the French, 150 miles more or less in the Sahara Desert, Morocco. And I thought, wow, that would be a huge birthday present, because next April I'm turning 60. And so the next week I went back and asked my friend Jared, who had asked me about it in the first place. I said, "Aren't you turning 40 next year?" He said, "Yeah." So I said, "Well, let's do this. This will be our this will be our big birthday present. And that's how it happened. And we wound up deciding that was a good idea. Went to a training camp, and then away we went. We flew to Morocco and started running in the Sahara. It's a stage race, so you're running that distance over a period of 7 days. So you're roughly averaging a marathon to 50K a day. It's not the same distance every day. In fact, one 2-day period is a 50-miler, and you can either run straight through and have a rest day, or you can break it up and run over 2 days. So it's a very interesting concept. But you also carry all your food, all your gear, your sleeping bag, everything you need for the week. You're carrying on your back. The only thing you don't carry completely is water, because you couldn't do that. So the race organizers provide water at certain checkpoints along the way and at night. And they provide a tent, which at least then, I'm guessing still, was a bunch of burlap sacks sewn together, held up by sticks, with a rug on the ground on top of the sand and the rocks. And that's where you slept with your 9 of your newfound best friends. And the camaraderie, the whole esprit de corps that engenders is just incredible. And so the fact that I was in Morocco, where I otherwise might never have gone, certainly not out in the middle of the Sahara, running on sand and rocks and climbing mountains for 7 days, something I never would have done, was completely appealing. And then the friendship and that sense of support. I mean, well, at the same time, everybody's an A personality and wants to beat you. They will also help you and support you. And, the swapping the stories at the end of the day and everything it was just fantastic. I just fell in love with the sport. And, 20 years later, I'm still doing this crazy stuff.
I love it. So how did you, so I want to spend time talking about Badwater. I mean, that's the main thing. I want to spend a lot of time talking about that in the show. And like I said at the beginning, you've had 60 some odd races that you've been a part of over just your ultra running history over the past 20 years, right? And I saw you've run like the Rocky Raccoon like multiple times, that 100-miler, and there's some other ones that you run multiple times. But what drew you to Badwater? Because if you look at any of your races that you run on your sign up, most of them say Badwater in their name, right? They're like, it's a large percentage of them. So what drew you to the Badwater family?
Again, it was circumstantial. So at Marathon des Sables, the American liaison, Jay Batchin, and his wife, Lisa Smith Batchin, put on a training camp out in the Tetons. And I went to that training camp to have some idea what the heck I was doing. And the first person I met was an ultra runner, a brand new one, who was also running his first ultra, Natu Natraj. And Natu and I became friends. And the next year, he had signed up for Badwater and asked me, this was 2007, and asked me if I would be on his crew. So I said, sure, let's do this. So I was introduced to Badwater as a crew member, supporting Natu. And we actually went out there about a month in advance to do a little training. And I just loved the desert. Now, unlike MDS, Badwater's run on the road, not on the sand, as I'm sure you're certainly aware. So yeah, I went out there and crewed for Natu, and I fell in love with the race. And so I applied for the next year, 2008. I got in, he crewed for me, and one thing led to another. And every year since then, 18 years now, I've either been crewing for someone, been on the staff, or run the race, actually 6 times. One was a straight DNF, the other where I had a calf issue. The other was I finished, but 17 minutes late. I'm sure we'll talk about that, and 4 finishes. So I just, the culture of the race, the family sense, the friends you see it there that you might not otherwise see during the course of the year, like so many ultra races, a million people go to across the years for the same reason. It's the family reunion. But it's that race I just something I really like a lot.
That's awesome. So for those that don't know what the Badwater 135 is that we're talking about, the start line is at the Badwater Basin in Death Valley, which marks the lowest, according to their website, the lowest elevation in North America at 282 feet below sea level. The race finishes at Whitney Portal at 8,360 feet of elevation. The Badwater 135 course covers 3 mountain ranges for a total of 14,600 feet of ascent and also 6,100 feet of cumulative descent. So really the race is all about climbing up. You have some downs every now and then after you go over some of these peaks, but ultimately it's a net gain for the entire race. And it's in the desert, and it's in Death Valley, and it's in July, which means it's quite toasty.
And the road.
Toasty indeed. Yeah, it was last month. It was 118 at the start, and I've raced it when it's been even a little hotter than that. But 118 is enough. It really is.
I would
It's
think
warm.
so.
So from your perspective, if you like you said, you crewed it, and I think Chris Kosman is the race director of the Badwater 135. He's the race director of all the Badwater races, so I could probably just say it that way. But I know one of the things he looks for on possible people who are interested in running the event is that they at least try to crew. He recommends it a lot. Like that's one of the things he's looking for is that you are familiar with what you're getting yourself into. And, I've talked to him before too. And one of the things that's very important to him, and I say this intentionally, is that a lot of people are going to look at that race, but he's got some stringent type requirements that he's looking for. And the reason he does is because he likes to have people finish the race. And so he's got a pretty good finishing rate, which is astounding when you compare the finishing rate for Badwater compared to some of the other races that may have worse finishing rates. It's not that those other races are harder. It's that how he's trying to get people who demonstrate a certain personality and certain character to be a part of his race because he wants everybody to finish ultimately. And so he kind of structures that way. So would you agree that's kind of how he approaches it and what his philosophy is on trying to get runners to do it? So if somebody's looking at how do they get into Badwater?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very, very important thing to him. And the other thing is that it was weird. I happened to be kind of inadvertently Googling a couple things today, and I happened to see something about Badwater, and there was a question there that asked, how many people have died at Badwater or running Badwater? And the answer is zero, right? And so another reason is to have people that not only know what they're getting into, but have had some experience so that you don't have the injury or the serious injury problem, death problem. I mean, the heat is extremely intense and it is dangerous. I mean, there's no question about it. You really do have to know what you're doing to stay ahead of the heat. And it's technical. It's not just one thing. It's a combination of nutrition and hydration and electrolyte balance, excuse me, and keeping your extremities as comfortable as you can by wearing ice in all the right places or, wet towels or whatever your choice happens to be. And everybody does a little different thing. Some people run in long sleeves and long pants. At one point last month, this race starts at night. And it's you have 48 hours to finish the race. So if you're a middle or back of the packer like I am, thank you for the elite designation, but not when it comes to my finish time. So I finished in 45 hours. That means I ran through 2 nights. So one of the real tough parts of this race is the sleep deprivation. It's one additional challenging component. But that first day when you're out towards Panamint Valley, it gets really, really hot there. And it was so hot this past race that the radiant heat from the road was actually burning my legs, burning my skin. So I wound up putting on a pair of long pants, which really helped. But so there are a million of these little things that you have to consider, excuse me, and be prepared for. And, that's just one little example. And that's also, of course, where your crew comes in, doing all the things that need to be done to keep you within your game plan and on plan. So I don't mean to be jumping all over the place, but in terms of the heat, there's a lot to it. And the other thing he does that is really smart is he provides a tremendous amount of educational material and constant reminders to pay attention to it. And some of those ideas are from very experienced Badwater vets who spend a lot of time in a sauna. And he talks about that and how you build a sauna training plan. And I mean, that's a really one-off kind of idea, but it's something that's really important for Badwater, right? So I'm fortunate. I live in Florida. I live where the heat is, but it really is a different kind of heat. And while I train and run during the day, I also hit the sauna on a somewhat regular basis prior to going out to run that race. So again, Chris provides a lot of important information to keep people safe, and you're right, to get them to the finish line.
So let's stay. Go ahead, Steve. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, and that's something that's a little bit different with Badwater than there is with other races. There are, because it is so hot and it is so, I would say, dangerous, there are no aid stations. He probably wouldn't be able to find volunteers to be able to man those aid stations. It would be dangerous for him because they're not used to the heat. So you really are relying on your crew the entire time.
Yeah, there actually are timing stations out there. And for the most part, the people who staff those timing stations have been out there like me, year after year after year doing those jobs. He has a lot of real veterans, volunteer veterans, some of whom are veterans of running the race as well, who come back to support the race as I do. So I'm not certainly alone in this. But yeah, you are required to have your own support crew. They're in a vehicle, typically 3 or 4 people. 4 is the max now, and they leapfrog you down the highway in their minivan or whatever they're driving. That's the ideal vehicle, but whatever. Just so happened, by the way, as an aside, 3 days before we flew out to run the race this year, the Chrysler minivan was recalled because of a safety issue, and every Chrysler minivan at every rental car company was pulled, and there were no minivans.
Oh,
So
no.
all of us had to scramble to find something to use as a support vehicle. And we wound up with a black Cadillac Escalade as a support vehicle, which was so weird. It really was. It worked okay, but not as bad as a minivan. But anyway,
I bet you look good. You look
we
good.
looked great. We really did. We were sharp. But so the crew leapfrogs you down the highway, meeting you. You decide every couple of miles, typically. This year we shortened it a little bit. This time to a little more than a mile. And each time you meet your crew, you either say, "Okay, I'm good to go," or you exchange water, you get some food, you change shoes, you get another ice bandana, whatever it happens to be. Put your night gear on, and that's vital. Without that, well, you wouldn't be allowed in the race, but there's no way you could finish. So
yeah.
the importance of a support crew in that race just can't be overestimated.
So how did you navigate your crew stops? And so you said it can be anywhere between 1 to 2 miles for most runners and stuff. But you specifically, like what was your gap that they were leapfrogging you on, and was it the same routine every time that you would go through, that they would say, okay, we're going to do this, this, and this, or every other stop we're going to apply lube on your feet? Like, I have no idea. Like, what kind of things would you do from one aid station to the next, if you will, or one stop?
What I typically do is realistically, my body will be able to absorb between 200 and 250 calories an hour. And it's extremely important to keep eating throughout the entire race. And one of the things, by the way, that the crew it really has to do is keep you on that plan. And in my case, at least, and I'm sure it's true with others, you reach a point where you just do not want to eat anything else. Keep it away from me, whatever it is. Or it's time for electrolytes, and I typically use Salt Stick, and I drink water and use a capsule instead of using something like Tailwind typically. Well, it's time for electrolytes. You need to take those electrolytes, and frequently you just lose track of time, and you push back. I just had one 5 minutes ago when it wasn't. It was 30 minutes ago. So your crew has to be on top of it, and when it's time to insist, and for tough love, that's who they need to be. Which is one reason why it's generally not a great idea to have a wife or a fiance or your mother out there crewing. So in our case, we decided to meet more frequently than some people do. We met every mile roughly. And typically we would exchange a bottle, because you get your bottle with ice in it and it melts very quickly out there. So you want to generally have cold to cool water. I'm getting some kind of food typically every half hour. So roughly every 2 times we meet, ballpark. And my go-to is, and has been for a long time, the old lady drink, Ensure, chocolate flavored Ensure, half a bottle every hour, which is about 120 calories or so, and a gel or something else that's 100 calories. And there's my nutritional intake requirement. And of course, you're out there for 45 hours. In my case, you need to break it up. So that's not all you're eating, but it's so hot, and your blood supply is mostly at your extremities trying to keep you cool. Mm-hmm. So digesting food is, for most people, an issue, or potentially so. And one of the things that can knock you out of a race real quick, you start having stomach or intestinal issues. So knowing what to eat, training that way, and then eating that way in the race is really important. And for me and most, it's fluids, gel type things, applesauce, things that'll slide down easy and are easily digestible. That's really, really vital. So that's what we do. And then, depending on how quickly I wear an ice bandana around my neck, what I do is tie a buff off at one end, put ice in it, and put it under my hat with the open end in the back. So as the ice melts, it kind of drips down my neck, which is cooling and helpful. But those things melt, so you have to replace those regularly. In this race, I was wearing a pair of Ultras and Drymax socks, and I never changed the whole race. It was one pair of socks, one pair of shoes, no foot issues. I did great. So that was not a problem this race, fortunately for me. The only thing I really did was I think I changed once, and I didn't change much at all, other than adding some reflective gear at night, changing hats during the day. Yeah, I was pretty consistent with what I was wearing. So, but they were there to do whatever needed to be done. If I needed to change shoes, or if I had blister issues, they'd be there to take care of it, or you name it.
So, I mean, I was just going to say a stop every mile to a mile and a half is a lot of stops. And one of the things that we talk about with our athletes in, 100-mile race or 200-mile races, you want to have a plan, get in and out of the aid station. How do you stop from just hanging out? Like, do you have a plan before you even go into it? Like, each stop is going to be like this, and it's going to be like a NASCAR pit crew. I'm not even going to know what's happening, and then we're moving.
Well, every hour on the hour, we stop for a cold beer. I mean, if that's what you're asking. No, we didn't. Okay.
I was like, dang, go ahead, Bob. No wonder we're in the S-plate.
Yeah. Now, well, the technique is to keep moving. So as you're always running on the left side facing traffic, and almost always the crew is pulling off on the right side where they can find a safe place to pull over. Because once you're off the blacktop, you can be in a sandy spot and get stuck. So you have to be. They have to be very cognizant of where they're stopping. But they then cross the street. They cross the road, typically carrying a little, like a plastic. It's almost like a bucket. It's like a garden tool carrier, and in that garden tool carrier, they'll have a couple of different kinds of food. They'll have my replacement bottle. They'll have whatever it is I need or they think I might want. They come across the street, and I'll continue moving. I'll continue walking as they do this replacement, give me my food, whatever it is. I finish what I'm doing typically, hand back the empties, and keep going. And also during this race, there are different rules, but you are allowed to have a pacer, not in the traditional sense, but I mean, by definition, a pacer is somebody out front who paces you and keeps you on track. At Badwater, the pacer is actually somebody who has to stay behind you. So it's more companionship and encouragement and enthusiasm than anything else. And sometimes before the next stop, they'll say, what do you want at the next stop? Have you changed your mind since you told them last time what you want next time? And then they can, basically run ahead and swap out whatever it is you feel like you want now. You want to sip a Coke, or you want some Gatorade, or you want a banana, or whatever it is. So running with a pacer, which I do probably for maybe half the race, can also be very, very helpful in terms of the efficiency of meeting your crew and keeping moving, right? So that's pretty important. The other factor, as I mentioned, is sleep deprivation. And this was an interesting one this year because I really didn't sleep as much as I might otherwise. I didn't wind up with hallucinating a lot, which is fairly typical when you're totally wiped out. The first night was fine. I was totally awake, totally fine. And then you get into the next day, the actual daylight hours, and that was fine as well. It really wasn't. I think at the 50-mile, the first checkpoint, first timing station, and it's a hard cutoff, and it's fairly tough, is at 50 miles. And there is a place there, a parking lot, where after that 50-mile spot where you can take a break, and I took a little break there. But then it wasn't until roughly mile 80-ish at Father Crowley Point, pre-planned, where I actually got in the vehicle and I slept for 50 minutes. And then I had I thought it was only one, but it was two other 20-minute naps. And that was it. Those were the second night. And that was it till the race was over. So I didn't kill a lot of time sleeping, which was good. The clock's running. You can take a sleep as much as you want. Go watch a movie, whatever. But the clock's ticking. So, and again, it's the crew that really helped me maintain discipline where sleep was concerned as well.
I've just got one question and I'm sure people who are listening do not care about my question I'm about to ask, but I'm a data person. And so I'm envisioning the 120 stops at least, right, for this crew stops that are going on. I feel like somebody on your crew needs to have some sort of clipboard or something that's just documented. Here's what we've done each time, because if I'm stopping every 20 minutes or 30 minutes, whatever the repetition is, or even 15 minutes, I've got to keep up with when you actually took that last electrolyte,
Yeah.
because when you start arguing with me, I've got to be able to refer back to some sort of tracker. And so I feel like one person's job almost has to be just basic logistics. Here's what we did.
Yeah, that is absolutely right. So let's say that they'll give me a fresh bottle, for example, and then we'll swap out the next time. Well, I may not have finished all that bottle. I might only had 4 ounces or something. So they're also tracking quantity. I mean, that is exactly what everybody does that, or should. Okay, they're even tracking how often I pee and what the color look like. To be sure that that there's a balance there where hydration and electrolytes are concerned. So in terms of data, yeah, it's very, very important that they track everything. My crew, I just, I couldn't give them a big enough shout out. So my crew chief was also my coach of 20 years, Lisa Smith Batchen, who
Nice.
is herself, as I'm sure you know, a totally elite runner. She won Badwater twice. She won Marathon des Sables once. I mean, she's an absolutely amazing runner, but even more amazing coach, and has been my friend and mentor for 20 years. So nobody knows me better than Lisa. And as a crew chief, she was on it. And in addition, Marshall Ulrich was on my crew. And for those of you who don't know Marshall, he's one of the most and respected ultra marathoners and adventurers in the world. He's run Badwater 20 times more than any other person. He's done all the 7 summits, each one in the first attempt. He's circumnavigated Death Valley. He and Lisa both have done not only a Badwater double, which we can talk about, but a Badwater quad, believe it or not. So between he and Lisa and my good friend Will Litwin, who I've run Brazil with a couple of times and Salton Sea very good friends and running buddies, they were the ones who mostly did the pacing. Marshall's wife, Heather, was that statistician you're talking about. She was the logistics person. She did most, not all, but most of the driving and did a lot of the record keeping. Now, the crew has to take care of themselves as well so that they don't become a problem and get sick. They have to take care of themselves, which means rest, eating, hydrating, keeping themselves cool, and so on. So they have a job to do, taking care of themselves as well as babysitting me. And that's all part of this game. And as you said, meeting me every mile instead of every 2 or 3 puts a lot more burden on them. No question about it. But given that, they still have to manage their own sleep, and they do. They were taking turns and getting what they needed to be able to finish the race with me, essentially.
That's fantastic. So I want to jump back for a minute. We've got a couple other things we want to talk to you specifically about this and your experience, but you were all over the news. You've been all over like podcasts, particularly I think you're on CBS. You've been everywhere, right? Because everyone is using this year. Yes, you turned 80 and you finished Badwater, but they're doing this because they're comparing your race in 2022. And in those final 17 minutes, and again, most people who've been following Badwater and everything can refer back to that particular event where they saw you almost bear crawling up to the Whitney Portal area, right? And so there were times that you were trying to work yourself up. So if you could kind of just remind us what was going on in 2022 that you were struggling so much, and then I'm going to compare that to 2025 in just a minute. But in 2022, what was going wrong that was causing you to do that, and why did you not quit?
Well, quitting isn't in my vocabulary. I mean, I felt that by hook or by crook, I'd get to the finish line, even if it was a little late. But I was just bound and determined to get there. But what happened was my back started going out. I've had some back issues before, but never anything like this. At about mile 100, I started with a lean, but it wasn't a sideways lean that happens to so many runners. It was a forward lean.
Oh,
my back was I was turning into a question mark, and it was weird. I mean, In fact, I made the joke that I was going to go to Hollywood and apply for the position as an actor as a question mark in the next whatever. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, it reached a point when I was approaching Lone Pine where I was literally looking at my feet. I was bent over almost in half, and I just couldn't straighten up without the help of my crew. So I'd stop for a second, they'd kind of help me straighten up and just shake out my back a little bit. But as soon as they started moving again, it happened again. So when I got to Lone Pine, I was actually way ahead of cutoff. I was doing fine. But that last 13-mile climb up Whitney is a long one and a very steep one. And it took its toll. And my back just kept getting worse and worse. So we're maybe a mile from the finish line. And in theory, I still had time to get there before the cutoff. But the closer I got, the more time elapsed. I mean, I was doing I could take 14 or 15 steps. I couldn't do anything else. I had to stop, gather myself, and try to do a few more. And it reached a point where my legs just wouldn't move. At that point, I had the race medical director walking alongside just to be sure I was okay. And I was totally fine. I was totally lucid, and I wasn't in a lot of pain. I just couldn't straighten my back up. But at that point, I said to her, is there any rule against bear crawling part of this thing, so that this rest of the distance, so I break up the muscles a little bit? Maybe that'll help me get there. And she said, well, the rule is you have to get there under your own power. So I guess so. So I alternated with some bear crawling and moving my legs, as much as I could that last mile. And there were a lot of people up there, a lot of friends of mine cheering me on and becoming increasingly concerned and then disappointed that I wasn't going to make the cutoff. But they were all there cheering for me, and there was no way I wasn't going to make it to the finish line. So yeah, if you think I'll ever forget the number 17 minutes and 27 seconds, no, I never will. So I finished, but it was unofficial, right? And I was disappointed. I was as much disappointed for them as for me, but I was somehow weirdly pleased that at least I crossed that finish line.
It's absolutely inspiring when you see it. It's inspiring. And I appreciate you explaining it like the lean except for the forward direction, because I couldn't figure it out. And I never really looked to see what was actually going on. But, I'm used to seeing people in ultras doing the lean and everything, but I've never seen somebody with a forward lean. So when you said it was a forward lean, I thought, oh, okay, so you're not in some sort of pain. This is just a byproduct of the effort that kind of happens to some runners. And we never know when it's going to happen, right? And it could be for any reason. But I've never seen somebody do the forward lean and stuff, but that makes a lot more sense to me of what was going on.
I mean, it was aching. I don't want to say it wasn't just uncomfortable.
You were bear crawling, Bob.
Sharp pain or anything.
Yeah, bear crawling is difficult to do.
I do have to tell you this aside, because when I was bear crawling, to tell you the crazy stuff that goes through your mind, I used to train with a trainer named Jeff here in Fort Lauderdale, who was extremely strict about form. So as I was doing that bear crawl, I was thinking to myself, my God, if Jeff was here, he would give me a raft of crap because my form was terrible. My ass was up in the air instead of being more flat. So I was thinking to myself, man, my form was awful, but whatever. Anyhow, that's what's
He may have let you go. He may have let you go on that one.
Maybe.
One other thing you said at the end of that race is that you're never coming back.
Yeah, well, I didn't say, I thought that I'd given it my best shot. And,
right.
You say things at the end of a race. I was sincere about it at that point. And very honestly, only 100 people get into that race every year. That's all the Park Service allows. So if I'm taking up a spot, that means somebody else ain't getting in. And I figured, you know what? I've had my Badwater 135 life. I've been out here 5 times, and I think I'm done. And so I had no sense that I was going to try to come back. I was always kind of a little bit in my mind, but because my goal really was to beat Jack Deness's record. And if I can take a second to talk about that, because it's sort of interesting. I was there at the finish line. Jack Deness is a Brit who was 75 when he became the oldest finisher. And that was in 2010. And just like there was a big group of people watching me, there was a big group watching him come into the finish line. Well, that was the last year that Badwater allowed 60 hours to finish the race. After that, 48 hours was the cutoff. Jack finished in 59 hours and 13 minutes, which meant if I was subsequently going to beat his record, I not only had to be older than 75, I had to beat his record by almost 12 hours, or I wasn't going to beat his record, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, but last year I wound up going down to Arizona in November and running Heather and Marshall Ulrich's Route 66 Ultra, which is a fun race. It's 140 miles. It's a road race, and I did well. And that's when I thought, maybe I ought to give this some thought. So I talked to Lisa about it, and I decided I'm going to go ahead and apply and see if the committee will let me in. And I scheduled a series of races early in the year to test myself, if you will. And so in January, I did, Chris Kosman has this virtual thing he does in January, the 267 VR, which basically is Badwater 135, Badwater Cape Fear, and Badwater Salton Sea. Add the mileage together, and it's 267. So you do it virtually. I did that in January. In February, I ran a 50-miler in Florida. In March, I ran Badwater Cape Fear, which is a 50-miler, 10 miles on the road, 40 miles on the sand in North Carolina, near you. And in April, I did his Badwater Salton Sea race, which is 81 miles out in San Diego County, not far from you, Steve. And I was able to complete those. And I thought, this is, and that was encouraging and gave me a lot of confidence going into the race on July 7th when we started there at Badwater Basin. I never had it in my mind for a minute that I wasn't going to finish. Once I made that decision, I'm coming out. We worked on strengthening my core. The fact is that my back started causing trouble again, but not really until we started up the portal. It was giving me a little trouble, but nowhere near what it was like 3 years ago. So if you look at the photos or the videos of me crossing the finish line, I was still bent over a little bit, but not in half. I mean, not even close. And again, a lot of that has to do with Leach's coaching and training, and all of my team being there to kind of help me through as I climbed that last 13 miles. I had forgotten how steep it was. My God, it's a tough finish. It really is.
That's
incredible. Sorry, I was literally just like drawn into the thing, and I went blank. So to me, it's just fascinating. So like if you mentioned that you and Lisa kind of changed your training, but let me pause there. As you were kind of talking about the races you did in Florida, then you did, I think you said it was a 50K, then you did a 50 mile at Badwater, you did the virtual 267 in January, and then you did the Salton Sea in April. That's a full year for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And the reason I just got so stunned when you were done talking is because I'm thinking, like, I'm talking to Bob, who's 80 years old, and I complain that I'm old and I don't know if I can pull off all these races sometimes. And I think, dang, like, you're pulling them off, but you're doing them well and you're finishing to them. So you can say you're not elite. And I know we call it elite because people are fast, but it's an impressive feat that you're pulling off. And you do prove the fact that age really isn't a number. But you mentioned that Lisa said, when you talked to Lisa, said, we're going to do this, she changed your training. You did a little more strength training and everything. What did you do differently this year versus what you did in 2022 to kind of help you become the oldest finisher of Badwater 135?
Well, it's a couple of things. Well, first of all, those races in effect become training, right? So Lisa's not a believer in huge mileage. For me, I mean, the beauty of her coaching is she tailors it to you as an individual, to your age and condition and experience and the race you're going to do if, in fact, you're training for a particular race, where you live. Like, there's, a lot of climbing at Badwater. Well, Fort Lauderdale's dead flat, right? So those are all things that are really important. So having the right coach and sticking to the plan, incorporating, in my case, races that were almost in lieu of additional mileage and training, but giving me some real deadlines and competition. Mm-hmm. That was all a part of it. And I think I forgot your question now.
What did you do differently?
Oh, yeah. Well, I did, again, a lot more core work to try to strengthen my back, strengthen my core, which is vitally important. It's not good enough just to have strong legs. The rest of you has to be strong as well. And honestly, I think having her there as my crew chief was really important, because, as I said, nobody knows me better. And if I was starting to have a problem, she would help me. And she's also a massage therapist. She does a lot of things. So there were, at least 3 or 4 times during the race where they'd throw a towel down on the gravel and I'd lay down and she'd stretch my legs out or massage my legs or my back. Excuse me. And that was also very, very helpful. So there wasn't a huge amount of difference. And I don't mean in any way to demean my crew from 3 years ago, because they were great and they're good friends of mine. But she is a very special person and was tremendously helpful. And again, that focus on core was a big deal for me.
It makes sense though, right? Because of
Yeah.
everything you dealt with the lean and everything, I'm sure it helped prevent that being as significant this time as well.
Right. And I was also very consistent. And I had a race plan that had a best case, worst case in terms of pace and therefore time to arrive at the different checkpoints. And in addition to keeping me on track with nutrition, hydration, and everything else, their job was to keep me within best case and worst case so that I would arrive at the finish line inside of 48 hours. And that was also an important part of this, that I was really consistent in my run walk routine, which is what I do. And also I didn't bomb the downhills because I didn't want to blow my quads out. I mean, I was very disciplined this time, even more so than usual about that. So, there were a few little things, little adjustments like that maybe at the end of the day aren't so little, that made me, that made it work this time. And, I got there in 45 hours and had time to spare, which I did not expect, but it worked.
That had to be an amazing feeling when you were climbing up and you realized you had so much time remaining.
Well, yeah, but at the same time, I remembered what happened 3 years ago, so I didn't get cocky. But it was nice to know I had a cushion. In fact, the last checkpoint up on Whitney, I guess I think you have like 2 or 3 miles to go to the finish line, and I needed my legs were shot. I needed to take a minute, and so I actually climbed into the Cadillac and sat in the front seat in the air conditioning for just a couple of minutes, but only a couple of minutes, because Lisa said, "All right, out, get going." So even with the cushion, she kept me moving, and they all did. And it was those little tweaks made all the difference.
That's awesome.
I mean, it's a cumulative effect. Like, it wasn't just one thing; it was a bunch of things that you cumulatively just had a better outcome. And I just had a question about like the mental aspect of it, because lining up to a race, particularly one that you've done before, you know how it's going to feel. Like for me, I know, like when I do a race for the first time, it's almost like you're a little bit naive, right? You know somewhat what it's going to feel like, but you may not have been on the course the whole time. But if you're going back to repeat the course, particularly one you DNF'd or one you had a hard time at, what's your mentality like at the start line? And because I know for me, it's like, I think the first time I do a race is the easiest, at least at the start line for me, for like that first 30 seconds before the gun goes off. And then every other time after that, I'm like, this is going to take forever. I know how bad this is going to hurt. I don't know why I'm here. And then the gun goes off and it all goes away. So is that the same for you?
Well, sometimes it is, but that sense of what the hell am I doing here usually happens well into the race. And then I remind myself, first of all, I chose to be here. Secondly, I have a goal, and the goal is to finish this race, and I'm not finishing this race. I mean, it's a mental game. I mean, you guys probably know or have heard of Ray Zahab, the Canadian ultra runner. And I love to quote Ray. He once told me, he said that ultra running is 90% mental and the rest is in your head. And he's pretty much right. It is a mental game. There's no question about it. So at the start line, I was feeling good. The adrenaline's pumping, so one of the things I didn't want to do is go out too fast. A few years ago, my friend Frank McKinney, who ran again this year, you started Badwater Basin on a wooden platform at the Badwater sign. Then you go up a concrete ramp to a sidewalk. You hop down onto the road and you keep going. He got to the sidewalk, hopped down, twisted his ankle, and his race was over. So one of the things I was going to be really careful about as that crush of people gets started was let them go, take your time, watch where you're stepping, just get out there and just go slow to go fast was basically my attitude. And you're right, I know the course, and I I felt comfortable with it. There was another little thing that really was actually a big thing this year too, that 3 years ago at the start of the race, we had a very strong headwind. So as we're coming out of Badwater Basin up onto the road and heading up the first 18 miles to Furnace Creek, we had a wind in our face the whole time that was blowing sand dust at us. So now you're dealing with getting sand in your eyes and in your nose, and it's sapping a lot of energy. It's taking a lot of energy to get through. I mean, we're talking about 15 to 20 mile an hour winds. It was strong. We didn't have that this time, and that made a big difference too in terms of getting off to a good start without burning a lot of unnecessary energy to deal with the weather. So, and I've had that happen out there before. You don't know what you're going to get. So that helped as well. So thank you, Mother Nature,
So I'm going to switch gears just a little bit. I want to talk about the Badwater community as a whole. What is it about the community, the people? And I mean, Chris is a little crazy. So like I say, he's his own bird. And if he's listening, Chris knows that I love him. So he's his own bird. But what is it about the community itself that kind of draws you back? Because it's close knit.
Yeah, it is, but also very, very welcoming too.
It is.
And, having been out there now, like I said, 18 years in a row, I see people, runners and volunteers and others who I may see at other races, but many of them I don't. And I really look forward to seeing these people who are my friends. And I know I call on them anytime as friends, even if I only see them once a year. But part of it might just be the hardship factor, the fact that it is a very difficult race to run, to crew, or to volunteer at. As you said earlier, who would want to be at an aid station out there in the middle of Death Valley with 120-degree, heat going on and maybe some wind and some dust devils stirring up the sand? It takes a certain personality, and I don't know. It's hard to explain. Look, as a race director, I try to create that sense of camaraderie in my own races, and I think at least in the Keys that there's a lot of that there. But this one, in part, maybe because it's also so small, Chris likes to point out, and others do, that I don't know. I'm going to get the numbers wrong, but like 10,000 people have climbed Mount Everest and 1,000 people have finished Badwater. I mean, it's a very small number of individual people who have finished that race over time. And that does tend to create something of a special family environment. And I'm a groupie. What can I tell you? And I admire Chris as a race director, which is why I also try to, when I can, go to his other races. So Badwater Cape Fear this year was the 11th time that Cape Fear was produced. I'm one of two that have run it every year. But I also go out there a couple of days in advance to volunteer, help set up and do whatever I can do, because I like being part of it and making, giving back and making a contribution. So.
Yeah, I think the first time I ever saw you, I did not introduce myself then. You were actually marking the course at the Badwater Cape Fear in the 1 mile trail section that we have, that's in the little maritime forest that's out there.
Right.
It's so easy to get lost. And you and some other guy were walking through the thing. And I was like, I think that's Bob Becker. He doesn't know me, so I'm not going to say anything. So I just kept going. But that was probably like 6 years ago. It was one of the first times I was out there. But for those listening, we're going to move off Badwater in just a second. But if you are interested in running Badwater, any of their events, they're all fantastic. They're all actually difficult in their own way. The Badwater Cape Fear we've talked about a few times even on the show. It's on a beach, like Bob said. And if you want to talk about headwind, it's always got a headwind. And it is generally quite brutal. And then the Salton Sea is often described as a mini Badwater 135 because it has a lot of the same elements that you experience in Badwater 135. So if you want to try out Salton Sea, you'll get a good flavor of what you could expect in 135, minus the degree of heat, I'm sure, just a little bit, right? But it still has its own extremes. And so it goes through a variety of different environments as well, much like Badwater does. And so the 135 does. And so I would invite people to check out any one of those races. You will have a great experience. You will be part of the Badwater family once you have got your first buckle or whatever you get from those. And so, yeah, definitely check them out. Bob, age is a number. And we have emphasized that you're 80. I tell people I'm in my 50s. And, we get told a lot of times about, I'm going to tell people that I do this type of sport. And I'm sure you do as well. They don't understand how they can do it because they think they're too old. And obviously we say, well, look at Bob, he's 80, but what do you say to people who put that self-limiting factor of age on themselves that say, I'm too old, I'm too fat, I'm too skinny, I'm too whatever, like, what do you say to people like that?
Well, first thing I say is that ultramarathoning is not for everyone. And, there is certainly, and I can say this in this company, there's certainly an insanity factor as a prerequisite, right, guys?
Sure.
But, but it doesn't, you don't have to run 100 miles or 50 miles or a marathon. Movement is what's important. And I might add, so is diet. But, if you're somebody who's very sedentary and you see people like me, people like you doing these things, and part of the joy for me is inspiring somebody to get off the couch and try something. Start by walking around the block if you can, or halfway up the block, and give it a try and try to stay with it a little bit. Give yourself, do it 2-3 days a week. And, at some point, say to that 15-year-old grandkid of yours, you know what, why don't we sign up for a 5K and we can, in 3 months, and we can walk it together and spend that time together as an idea, or ride a bike, or go swimming, or start a garden in your backyard, move, whatever it is that you enjoy doing, give it a shot. And if you want to consider running, start with walking. If you want to get serious about it, I absolutely recommend a coach or a running group.
Mm-hmm.
I told you when I first said to my buddies up in Minnesota, yeah, I'll do this marathon with you. I didn't know what to do. I went and joined a running group. And a couple of my very best friends to this day were the people I met in that first running group 20 years ago. So not only does it help you with goals and form and how to do it the right way, and help you with buying the right shoes and the right gear and all of that, but it's a wonderful way to make friends, meet new people that live in your neighborhood. So there are a lot of benefits, including obviously the health benefit of getting some exercise. And if you also combine it perhaps with a change in diet, losing weight and getting healthier and making your heart more healthy and everything else. So you don't have to jump from 1 to 100 by any stretch.
I like it. I like that a lot. You mentioned earlier when you were talking about, you were mentioning, I think, some of the running that you've been doing, that you employ a run-walk strategy. And when I met you at Badwater 50K one year, you were doing the 50K. I'd been volunteering at an aid station. I was coming beside you and you were doing a run-walk then. And you said, I said, can I run with you or be beside you for a minute? You said, well, I'm doing a run-walk. I hope that's okay. I'm like, listen, I run-walk all the time. I think it's fantastic. What is your advice about run walk? It's a very popular thing more and more in our community because people find it's a very solid strategy. But what have you found it to be? How have you found it to be beneficial for you?
Well, like most of us, I started off, trying to run the whole race, and too frequently wound up with that death march at the end, right?
Yeah.
And after a whole lot of years, because I'm not very smart, I realized, you know what, I'm really going to probably wind up walking about half of the race, depending on the race. So why don't I start that right at the beginning? Now, I didn't invent this by any stretch of the imagination. But for me, what I started playing with and realized was that if I did a 1 minute run, 1 minute walk, I would wind up running those 1 minute running segments faster and recovering faster. And overall, my pace would be better if rather than doing something like a 3-3 or a 10-4, 10-1 or whatever. And when I put that into use actually was, I think it was 2019 when I ran a race for the ages. And that was one of those races where, one of those very few in my life where I thought, you know what, if the stars align, I might be able to win this thing. But I knew that I was going to be out there for 74 hours. And so I started right from the beginning doing a 1-1, not letting, again, that adrenaline get me running the first 10 miles. No, right from the beginning, 1-1, disciplined. And I was still doing 1-1s 230 miles later when I won the race and broke the record. So and that's when I learned that for me, it worked. I'm not going to do 1-1s going uphill and may not do them going downhill. I mean, I walk the ups. I typically run more than I walk the downs. So in flatter areas, that's when I'm doing 1-1. And ARFTA, Race for the Ages, was basically flat. So the whole race, I was able to do that. So again, it worked. That works for me in that particular short sequence works for me, but not for everybody. You need to play with it and see. But yeah, and basically the death march kind of went away, which was kind of good.
I love hearing that because I think a
Yeah.
lot of runners will do a death march at the very end. And I think this is a way that they could prevent that at least, or prevent it from happening quite so soon. Right.
Yeah,
That
or
may
so
not.
severely. Yeah, I mean, I recover more quickly as well. So that's the other thing.
And,
Yeah.
I've found too, like the newer runners that are moving up into a certain distance or just new in general to running, once you introduce that run walk, it becomes a little bit more approachable to them and they understand it a little bit more. They're like, oh, okay, I don't have to run the whole 50 miles, 100 miles. I can do a run walk and we can knock it out almost in the same time, but just not feel as bad.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're not all Harvey Lewis, you know. I mean, it's just it just you
Yeah.
know, when when you're an elite of the elite,
Yeah.
you know, we wouldn't have this discussion. But they're a different species anyway, and I love Harvey and I love watching him and as an example. But yeah, so I mean, if you're an elite runner, really really strong runner, you don't need to do this stuff probably. But if you're an average an average runner, and especially if you're new to the sport,
Mhm.
it's also one way to avoid injury because you can run yourself into injury real easy too. So that's
Mhm.
another thing.
Yeah, I have found that when runners try it out, they're shocked by their paces. And the reason I say that is that if you ask a runner to put together their run plan for their pacing plan rather for a 100-mile race, they're going to tell you what their pace is going to be for this 10 miles, this next 20 miles, 30 miles, whatever. They're going to kind of show you what their degradation of paces are, right? And sometimes along the line, it's going to say like 17 or 18-minute miles. And I'm like, well, what if you could average 15 minutes the entire time? And they're like, well, I don't know if that's possible. I was like, what if you could average like 13 minutes for the first 70, 80 miles simply because you're doing a run walk? And they find it to be shocking that they can actually have an overall faster race than just trying to run and allow that degradation to kind of take place. And so I invite them to check it out just to see, because most people think in terms if they're just going to dedicate time to walking, that they're going to have a really slow event. And not in a comparable ultra running pace. They really aren't.
Yeah.
Like they
And
would
if
be
you're
shocked.
smart about it, you're going to train. You're going to power walk train as well, and you can
Yeah.
train yourself to walk at a faster, comfortable pace, just like you can train yourself to run at a faster pace. So, again, I keep bringing up the idea of having a coach that knows what they're doing if you're struggling to figure it out. But you want to if you're going to do something like that, then you want to train.
Mm-hmm.
You want to do walking training as well because it's going to truly impact your time. No question about it.
Agreed. Agreed. I want to talk about your races. So
Love it.
I know you're the race director for
Mhm.
the Daytona 100 and also the Keys 100. I think more people are familiar with the Keys 100 simply because it's a destination type race for a lot of folks, right? Daytona is nice, but when you compare it to the Keys, Bob, we both know that the
Yeah.
Keys is a destination race, right?
Sure it is.
But Daytona is a fantastic event too. We mentioned before the show, I've got a runner who's targeting this December to run that race. And so both of them are fantastic events. And so for yourself, how would you describe the two events, and why should somebody consider signing up for them?
Well, I'll start with Daytona because excuse me. First of all, it's in Florida in December, and it's North Florida, so the weather's great. I mean, the weather's beautiful, and the course is almost entirely flat. You've got a couple of ridges, but basically, it's flat and fast. It's a very good place to set a PR. It's a very good first ultra. We offer a 50K, a 50 mile, and a 100 mile, and even a four-person 100-mile team relay,
Mm-hmm.
which, by the way, is a great way to get to be introduced to the sport. If you're not ready for an ultra, grab three of your buddies and
Mhm.
do a relay race. It's a much more laid back part of old Florida. You're running right along the ocean road, so the views are spectacular. The finish line is at the foot of the historic Ponce Inlet Lighthouse. It's a beautiful spot. Right afterwards, we have an award ceremony directly across the street at a bar, a restaurant, right on the water. I mean, it's just really a cool place, and
Mm-hmm.
you can run with or without a support crew, unless you're a 100-mile rookie, and then you do have to have a support crew. But
Mm.
otherwise, with or without full aid station support that you can take advantage of, or your own crew. So it's a really good first race.
Nice.
And that would be my best answer for Daytona. Now Keys, you're right, it's a destination race, and you're literally running from Key Largo to Key West across 42 islands with the Atlantic Ocean on one side and the Florida Bay, Gulf of Mexico on the other side. So the scenery is, unless you don't like turquoise, the scenery is pretty beautiful, right? And the venue is unique. There's one road in and out of the Keys, and you're on it. And now you're 75 to 80% of it. You're on bike paths or old side roads or pedestrian bridges. So you're not on the road the whole time by any stretch of the imagination. But it's just it's a classic race, and it's a road race, or a pavement race, but you end on the beach in Key West at Higgs Beach. It's a beautiful place. People just hop right in the beach and get right in the water and get wet. Big party there. And then Key West is just a fabulous place to hang out. If you've never been there, it's just as funky as it can be. And, you feel like you're in the islands, but you're in America. You're not in the islands. And what happened after, and by the way, the race is in May, so it is a hot weather race. It's more difficult than it looks like on paper because it's pretty much flat. But when we tried the idea out in 2007, when 4 friends of mine and I ran from Key Largo to Key West to see if it would be viable for a race, because there weren't any ultras in South Florida. And we really liked the idea and thought, you know what? Let's make it a little more challenging. Let's do it in May instead of January or something. And, once you pick a race date, it kind of sticks. But there was another reason why we did that. In those days, and this was 18 years ago, April 30th was the end of the season. So hotels were cheaper and there wasn't as much traffic, which is not the case anymore, but because it's now a year-round destination, especially after COVID. But it's just a spectacular. The scenery is spectacular. It's a great challenge. It's a wonderful finish line, and last year we had 915 runners in this race, including the relay teams. And again, it's a great experience for people who want to be introduced to what ultra running is all about. Put a team together. It's a 50K, a 50 mile, and a 100 mile again, and a 6-person 100-mile relay or a 3-person 50-mile relay. And as a relay runner, you're running along with these ultra runners and saying, wow, that overweight guy is doing 50 miles. I think I could do that. And it's amazing how many people have gone from that introduction to become ultra runners and join the ultra running community in Florida. That's been a wonderful part of this whole experience, to introduce so many people to the race. But yeah, it's, if you're going to do Keys, make sure you spend a couple extra days at the end before you go home, hanging out in Key West and enjoying the place. It's a lot of fun.
So I would say, if you want to run a race in Florida and you want to have a fun time and an easy time and a good time, I would do the Daytona 100 just because of temperature. Now, it's interesting if you're not familiar with the Keys. One of the things you just said is that the end of the season, or the off season in the Keys, is typically, I think it's May to August. And that's considered the off season in the Keys, which for most people are like, that's their summer vacation. It's the off season because it's hotter than Hades in the Keys during May through August. And so I'm going to use this as an opportunity to kind of compare something you said about Badwater 135 and about the Keys 100. So I'm going to use these two comparisons, right? What's the difference in dry heat and humid heat? Because you get both flavors in these two races. They're two different events. Like, how would you describe the difference as somebody who plays in both?
Well, in the Death Valley heat and the desert heat, because it's much hotter, but because it's drier, your sweat tends to evaporate. You don't tend to accumulate, sweat in your shoes, for example. So it's a different kind of preparation. You need to be much more cognizant of blister issues and chafing issues. And a lot of it is just proper preparation and knowing how to deal with those things. So at Badwater, it's staying ahead of the heat so that you're wearing ice all the time. And there's some of that at Keys as well, because you have a combination of temperature, humidity, and the intensity of the sun. Typically, there's no shade in either race. So it's a challenge. There's no question about it. But you want to pay particular attention to your shoes, your socks, the likelihood of swelling, the potential for blisters. And if you're not a blister maven expert yourself, have somebody on your crew who can help you if you need a retape and so on. Lube up, have the right products, and you should be fine. But you want to train for the heat. Now, we do not have a prerequisite requirement. You do not have to have had an experience running a 100-mile race to enter Keys 100, which is why one of the reasons why our finishing rate is lower than it would be at Badwater.
Mm-hmm.
And we've played with it over the years. And because you do have to have a support crew at Keys 100, since COVID, you have to. We found that the finishing rate is better. The likelihood of issues is not as high because you have your own people taking care of you. And like Badwater, leapfrogging you down the highway, stopping at prescribed locations, but you have people who love you and who are taking care of you along the way, and that makes a big difference. It really does.
Yeah, I find that the humid heat is you're wet all the time. You're just wet constantly, and it's hard to feel cool because none of that is evaporating off when I'm running in a drier, more arid place. And when I'm in a drier place and I'm running, I don't realize I'm sweating as much. And that's the danger there. You don't realize how much of sweat's coming off your body because it's just evaporating so quickly. And so people don't see it the same way. And so it is a difference. But at least in the drier environment, you see the salt rings on your hat. In the humid environment, it just is wet because you can't see it because it's still sitting there.
You're just swimming.
Well, but you still want to wear ice bandanas, and you still want to stay ahead of the heat. I mean, you still need to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You just need to be a little more careful about the any dripping that you have, any wetness that you have. Wear wicking clothing. I always wear long sleeves when I run to try to keep the sun off as much as possible. And sometimes it's really ridiculous looking straw hat, but what it does is it keeps the sun off me and yet still allows air circulation. And sometimes, like I said, in Panamint Valley and last month, I throw a pair of pants on, lightweight, but they make a difference. So, you have to experiment with things and try things that work for you. But I've run the distance, not on race day, but I've done it 3 times, and you can get through without big problems. But you need to focus on what the big issue is, and it's not the distance so much as it is figuring out the heat and staying ahead of it.
Yeah, so I say check out the Keys 100 if you want to be warm, and check out the Daytona 100 if you want to be cool. both are fantastic races, and I think they can find them. Are they both listed on Ultra Sign Up? I think the registration is through Run Sign Up, though, isn't it?
Yeah, registration's on Run Sign Up. So, yeah, but the websites are easy. It's keys100.com.
Okay.
And Daytona100ultra.com. I mean, I think you can find them. Yeah.
Yeah, they can Google search them like we do for everything.
Yeah,
absolutely. Sure.
We love the fact that you're a race director as well, because we think everybody should come check out your races. I mean, listen, you're a runner, but you love putting on races for people because you love the sport. I mean, that just comes out. And so I find that great race directors are also those who've participated in endurance sports, and they tend to have really good events. So I encourage everybody to check it out. So, Bob, at the end of all of our episodes, we do this segment we call the Coach's Corner. And it's when we have a listener send in a question that they can ask of us as the host, but also one that we ask our guests to participate in and answer as well. And so sometimes the questions go a little all over the place, and we never really know where it's going to go. Sometimes we give great answers. Other times we look back and we think, well, I mean, we probably could have done a little bit better. So there is no pressure on getting this right or wrong. But the best thing about this one is that this actually comes from one of our hosts' mom. It's not mine, because mine doesn't run. But it comes from Miss Anna Epifano, which is Steve's mom, who I met as well. So the question comes from Anna. She wants to know, what are your thoughts on compression socks?
Oh, Anna, first of all, best of luck running in North Carolina this year. I know you're going to nail that 100-miler. Steve and I talked about you before the race started, so good for you. Very, very much an individual thing. I find them not to be helpful. Recovery, sometimes yes, but during races, my feet and ankles don't tend to swell a whole lot in my calves, so I haven't found a need to wear them. And when I have, I just haven't found them to be that helpful. In fact, I found them to be a little uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But when I'm running a long race, I have a little bit of everything with me. So I will bring compression stuff in case something happens where it looks like that's going to be helpful. And so whether you wear them to start or not a bad idea to have them with you, because you may find yourself at some point in the race where they will be helpful and you can throw them on. So that's my best recommendation.
That's a great point. At least carry it with you. Why would you leave it at home, right? So,
yeah.
What do you think, Steve?
You notice she didn't ask her coach, who's me. She didn't ask that question directly. So
I mean,
she wanted to get a
she's
better.
a kid,
She
dude.
wanted to
She
get a
really
better
doesn't care.
answer somewhere. Yeah,
She's probably not going to listen to what you have to say now anyway.
probably not. I'm kind of on the same idea as Bob. I've never used them really myself during a race. I'll use them here and there, especially like calf sleeves or something like that as a recovery tool. You know, the like scientific studies are kind of out there. You can find it to support either one. So I'm a big proponent if it's a placebo effect, it still works. So if you find that it
Yeah.
works for you, then it works for you. But like you said, it's pretty much individual.
Yeah, I would say I've had a couple experiences with them. Not compression socks. I've done like the calf sleeves as well. When I used to do Spartan races, I would wear calf sleeves every now and then. I stopped using them because I couldn't get them off my legs afterwards. It was a complete pain. My legs be cramping. So the only time I wear them now as a runner, it's not even when I'm running. I've torn my calf before, and I found them to be very helpful in those situations to kind of just make me feel more confident when I started back trying to run a little bit. So I used them then. But I think it was all mental because I haven't noticed any kind of net positive result from using them. However, if it's a mental positive,
You got
Yeah.
it.
then that means they work. And so slap
You
them
bet.
bad boys on and call it a day. Because like Steve said, there's not a right or wrong. And so if you find success and you're listening to these and you're like, you love your compression socks or whatever that you have, I say wear them all day because they're doing you a favor. But anyway, so that's Coach's Corner. Coming to us from Anna. We could not have done it without her this week, Steve. So you can tell your mom thank you.
I will.
Awesome. If you're listening, you have a question about anything that you want us to ask or discuss on the show, please send it in to us. We would love to air it and kind of share it with our guests and maybe even surprise them. You can ask any kind of random question. We're okay with that too. But so thank you, Anna, for sending that in. But for those listening, thank you for being a part, downloading the episode. And Bob, thank you for hanging out with us despite all the technology issues we had in the very beginning and the challenges I had. I appreciate your patience and you being with us today.
I loved it. It was great. Great questions, and just really good talking to you, seeing you again, and hearing about Steve's mother. I think that's phenomenal. Thank you, guys.
Awesome.
Thanks a
Well,
lot.
Get her out and
Bob, you have
running.
a great Bob, you have a great night. Thank you again for being with us. And for those listening, do us a favor, go ahead and leave us a like, comment, subscribe, whatever you want to do. Just something fun like that would be helpful. We'd love to hear from you. So if you got any feedback that you want to give to Steve or to me or even to Bob, maybe you've run his race, we'd love to hear that as well. So let us know and we will pass that along. But again, thank you for taking the time to listen and we will talk to you all again soon. See ya.
See ya.
Bye bye.